Onado Yudeji Nakin, Aditi Dajida, Maranguru Roy, Nyalikida Noado, Abuku Pirgaidi, Apanikangi, Onadiate Jukangi, Eho Tagranya Jamata, Aditi Dajidado, Salkulubangi Yamidado, Tagranja Mankida, Maranguru, Alum Bhavna. नुको हासासिल चढ़े की नोतुमका दे उना तिजु को उना को उनको द छलकुल जामा इंदो श्रीराम दादी द सिस्टिए ठाकुरान मैन किदा मारांग बुरु मैन किदा तब इन हो कराम दादी के सिस्टिए श्रीराम कराम दादी के सिस्टी किदा के
With over 4 million people, the Santhals are the third largest tribe in India. They predominantly inhabit areas in West Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Assam, Madhya Pradesh and the newly formed states of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. They are also to be found in the neighboring regions of Bangladesh and Nepal. The Santhals have been identified as belonging to pre-Dravidian ancestry, even as history recorded their existence only in the late 18th century. Having such an ancient presence in the Indian subcontinent, they have inherited a rich and diverse culture of their own, originating from the Austro-Asiatic linguistic group, which is sometimes referred to as the Mundari group of languages. The Santhals are also ethnically related to other tribes of the area, such as the Hos, the Khariyas, and the Mundas. The story of their origin and the legends of the Santhals underline an entire history of migration. Their mythology traces their origin from the mythical lands of Hihiripipri, Khoj Kaman, Harata Mountain to Champa and ultimately into modern history at Chota Nagpur, from where they were again forced to leave as a result of the pressures of feudal forces in the colonial era. In a later period, they challenged colonial rule in what is known as the Kharwar movement. But the Santhals did not passively accept the prevailing hegemonies of their time. In 1855, under the leadership of Sido and Kanhu, there was a violent uprising against the British rulers by the Santhals. Although their traditional weapons did little against the weapons of the superior power. The Santhals fought with all their might in protecting their culture and habitat assaulted by the forces of colonialism, feudalism, and industrial capitalism. Ultimately, the British moved many Santhal communities to settlements known as Parganas. The Santhal Parganas exist to this day mainly in West Bengal, an evidence of their legacy as a colonialized people.
The objects that you hear of Santhals and others are, I think, of great importance to the making of the new India that we have or was proposed at the inception of independence, the life of living people, the life of our forefathers who long time ago were invisible to us now, and it shows that life is not, it cannot be passive. It cannot be from a distance, we are all observer looking at television or something, object like that. But it is participatory, invites us also to be active parts of that into reappraising the kind of stream in which we are flowing down today willy-nilly by people from a distance who give us models which we do not have any say in at all. But these simpler societies, which we call simpler, and they are not necessarily simplistic, what has happened is that the smallness itself, the rootedness in a certain soil, in a certain place and time, all these are also, I think, one at the same time, are plus points. The advantages, because it shows that the individuals in the society, the persons in the society, the tribals which we call, all that had a kind of horse sense, a good sense, a kind of common sense, all these things, they understood reality. A sense of realism was there. The objects, even as we admire them, and those of us here cannot separate, I cannot separate very often the object that we see. It's very hard to say what is art and what is craft. These two terms have also got divorced. That is to say, the craft underlies the art. The art is the feeling element of it. And feelings are important, I think, purified feeling, because it is in service of this that you learn the craft, how to knit, how to draw, all the rest of it. And these people seem to have had it almost instinctively.
The beliefs of the Santhals are based upon the spirits of forces behind their natural environment. It is the unseen forces or the spirits behind trees that allow the tree to bear fruit that is seen as vital. The Santhals refer to these spirits as BONGAS, which are behind all natural phenomena, both benevolent and malevolent. According to a traditional Santhal belief, a hierarchy exists as to the importance of certain bongas. Thakurjiu, their supreme deity, is credited with the actual creation of the Santhal people. Three other bonga deities, often referred to as a trinity, are Maranburu, or the Great Mountain, Jaherera, or the Lady of the Grove, and Moreku Turuiku, an incarnation of several bongas. These three are the functional deities in the devotional lives of the Santhals. As in other animistic belief systems, the spirits or bongas are credited or blamed for virtually all natural occurrences. For the Santhals, there is no defined line between the natural and the supernatural. They live in a mystical world where the Santhals and the bongas are inseparable entities impacting each other. An itinerant class of folk painters known as Jadu Patuas developed uncanny insights into the life and culture of the Santhals due to a long passage of interaction between the two communities. The relationship between the Jadu Patua folk painters and Santhal tribal communities in eastern India has produced an entire art genre assimilating elements from the cultures of both the folk artists and their tribal patrons.
12 বছর পরে রে সিরেম কারাম রে কিন আপনি না সিরেম কারাম কুপেটে কাতে সিরেম দান্দি কারাম দান্দি রে কিন তুকে দিদা তুকে কাতে বাবা বারিয়া কিন বিলি দিদা ওনা বিলি রিয়া বাবা হাসাসি ছেড়ে কিন জন্ম দিনা নুকিন কিন রাগ কান তাহে কানা বাবা হাসাসি ছেড়ে কিন রাগ কান তাহে কানা उन जुखा मेन किदा तबे दूसरे नेला गई में उन जुखा कोटाल मिट्टे कुल किदा बाबा मिट्टे.
With these limited colors and materials, Jadu Patwa scrolls in the Santhal Parganas show, on the one hand, a great variety of idiom and treatment, and on the other, a consistent adherence to certain basic assumptions. Since the painters were men, they did not move away from their native village when they married, and as a result, local family styles can be clearly distinguished. Jadu Patwas of adjoining circles in each subdivision were, however, aware of each other's family idioms and may well have borrowed subconsciously from each other. The figures are depicted on a single flat plane and show a bland indifference to naturalism. The stories are told in a series of simple, clear-cut images in panels divided by horizontal bands. Trees, flowers, or rocks are depicted by simple diagrammatic forms. Figures are usually shown in profile with a standard corrugated line linking the sloping forehead with the nose, the lips, and the chin. The eyes are vastly enlarged. Santhal women, who in real life are amply curvaceous, are shown with straight vertical figures which echo the graceful movements of Santhal dancing. However, what brings these works of visual artistry into the realm of ritual are the songs that accompany the scrolls. In this context, the paintings are only a single element in a performance art which belongs to the Bengali folk performance traditions such as Jatra and the Chow dance. To view these paintings purely by analyzing their visual form would be, at best, to see only half the picture. The painting, the song, and the very act of the patua unraveling the scroll, both visually and lyrically, are, in their entirety, the traditional art of the patuas. But times have taken a heavy toll on the socio-economic conditions of the patuas. Marginalized with the advent of cinema, jatras, and other forms of visual entertainment, the patuas' exclusive relationship with the Santhals as providers of entertainment and fulfillers of ritual needs has been eroded. As a result, they are today reduced to penurious living and have taken to singing and dancing to earn their livelihood.
তুলিটা হলেন মানে ছাগলের রুয়া আর বাঁশের কুচির ডালিটা আর সুতায় আমরা কিন্তু তবে কিন্তু আমাদের চিরজীবনে এটা আমাদের
But some of the patuas have braved the vicissitudes of poverty and have continued to paint. They have managed to sustain a centuries-old tradition of at least providing visual entertainment through their paintings, if not fulfilling the ritual needs of the santhals, which they once did. To reconstruct the history of the patuas would be difficult due to the impermanent nature of their art. However, this community has been a vital force in the culture of rural India since ancient times. References to such artists exist in the ancient literature of Panini and Kalidas. As descendants of the mythological master craftsman Vishwakarma, the patuas justify their hereditary profession as craftspeople, though belonging to a lower caste. Some of these artists have replaced the title of patua with chitrakar, as its implications are viewed as being more secular. Therefore, the two titles, patua and chitrakar, are synonymous with each other. Moreover, many patuas keep both Hindu and Muslim names and use either one according to the faith of their clientele. The patuas, who generally live near the santhal villages, do so in an even more complex social world, in that they not only have to incorporate elements of the local Hindu and Muslim ethos into their art, along with the santhal beliefs.
চক্ষুদানের যে পথটালি যাওয়া হয় সেটা অন্য জায়গায় জিজ্ঞাসা করতে হয় যে যেমন আমাদের যেমন সুন্দরডি কেউ একজন মারা গেল ভাই অমুক লোকের নাম কি ছিল তার নাম কি ছিল না অমুক নাম সেই তার নামটি ধরে সেই গ্রামে আর কি যাওয়া হয় তার ঘরে যেতে গেলে তারা তো অবাক হয়ে যায় তাই তো আমার ছেলেটার নামই কী করে জানলো এই হলো জাদু আর অন্য কিছু নেই অন্য লোকের কাছে মানে খবর নিয়ে করে যায় মানে সেখানে চক্ষুদান করা হয় এই আর অন্য কিছু নেই
In the context of the santhals, the patuas are commonly referred to as jadu patuas or magic painters. The primary reason for this title are the Chakshudan genre paintings they produce for the santhal families of the recently deceased. The Chakshudan painting would depict a deceased santhal without the eyeballs, thus signifying that the spirit of the deceased would wander around blind in the afterlife unless the painter paints the eyeballs after being paid for. On hearing of a death in a santhal community, the Jadu Patua would approach the mourning family with a painting depicting either a man or a woman, young or old, according to the age and sex of the deceased. The artist would then offer to restore sight to the dead in exchange for objects often depicted in the paintings themselves. By executing the transformative act of painting the eye of the spirit of the dead, the patuas were transformed from painters to magic painters. But they were never considered extortionists.
This art has three elements that are very important. The first is that it is art that is not divorced from life. It is not alienated. It is art that takes life and death naturally. And the Jadu Patuas, in fact, bring the dead person to life through the painting. And this is what gives them the very special contemporary character. Because life and death are not seen as separate things, they're seen as a continuity. Death is there and life is there, and all of it is a part of the process of living. Philosophically, I think the Santhals are much more sound than many of your religions which dwell too much on heaven and hell.
The art historian Mildred Archer identified 7 distinct themes of Santhal painting other than the Chakshudan Pat. Death's Kingdom or Jomraj is to this day a common theme of the Jadu Patwas. The Lord of Death, Jom, is commonly depicted as obese and dark in complexion, dealing out his punishments to the wicked souls. His minions, usually smaller dark figures, are also depicted in these scrolls, ravaging and torturing those who have been punished by Jom. This type of scroll, in part, functions as a didactic, reinforcing the Santhal's own moral code. Another type of scroll depicts the Santhal flower festival of Bahapurub, which occurs between February and March, marking the beginning of the new farming year. This scroll would depict the various activities involved in this festival, including the dances and the ritual sacrificing of foal by the Neiki or the Santhal priest. The festival occurs in the sacred grove of the Santhal village called the Jahir Than, or the place of the Bonga Jahir Era. As the Bahapurub is considered to be the holiest of Santhal festivals, homage is paid to the trinity of Maranburu, Moreko Turuiko, and Jahir Era. During the festival, sacred stones represent each of these bongas, and like found art, they are recontextualized, each stone having been placed under a corresponding sal tree. Even now, among the most popular of the scroll paintings is the depiction of the Santhal story of creation. There are many subtle variations to the narrative for which there are 2 possible explanations. Firstly, the creation story has been told and retold from an outsider point of view, from missionaries transcribing the narrative into English in the late 19th century. Also, the Jadu Patwas themselves have been depicting the story in their scrolls as outsiders to the Santhal people. Secondly, the Santhals themselves must have accepted foreign elements, specifically mainstream Hinduism, that suited the structure of their own beliefs. The Santhal creation story, as the English-speaking world knows it, is derived from the translations provided by 2 European missionaries in the late 19th century. They were Reverend L.O. Strefsrud, who produced his translation in 1870, and Reverend A. Campbell, who wrote his in 1892. The supreme god of the Santhals, Thakurjiu, created water creatures from the great mass of water covering the whole earth. Then he commanded the water creatures to create earth and created 2 birds, Hans and Hasil. From the birds came the 2 human forms, the ancestors of Santhals, namely Pilku Haram and Pilku Budhi, Western equivalents of Adam and Eve. From them sprung the Santhal clan. In the process, 3 more gods came into being: Maranbaru, Moreko Turuiko, and Jahir Era, who entered the folklore, signifying possibly the Hindu concept of the Trinity. Interwoven in the creation story are the tales of creation, destruction, and recreation of Santhal tribes. Curiously, the first panel of many creation story scrolls and Baha festival scrolls often depicts the Bonga trinity of Maranburu, Moreko Turuiko, and Jahir Era in the form of the Hindu Vaishnav trinity of Jagannath, Balabhadra, and Subhadra from the Puri temple. The local mythology contains a legend where the 18 sons of an old Santhal king were beheaded and their streams of blood were transformed by a bonga into waterways that travelled from the Santhal Parganas to the Jagannath temple in Puri. The tiger scrolls are specially interesting as they have a religious significance for the Hindus, the Muslims, and the Santhals alike. Both local Muslims and Hindus worship Bade Khan Ghazi, the god responsible for controlling the tiger in much of rural Bengal. By the proper invocation, Ghazi is believed to protect the villagers from tigers or leopards attacking them and their livestock. Among the Hindus and Muslims who live near the Santhal Parganas, Ghazi is also known as Satyapir and is depicted by the Jadu Patwas as a Muslim holy man mounted on a fierce tiger. Possibly due to the dwindling of the tiger population, many Satyapir or Ghazi scrolls depict the spotted leopard instead of the tiger, reflecting more accurately the current ecological reality. Performing artists also take the roles of Satyapir and perform story-based jatras from village to village.
এই নারায়ণ ঠাকুর নিয়ে আমি পূজা পাশা করি, গ্রামে গ্রামে যায়, সকলে চাল পয়সা সাহায্য করে। এটি হলো কোকিল গায়ের নেজ। এটি ছেলেদের মাথায় দিলে জ্বর কমে যায়। জ্বর কমবে কি? এটি কোকিল গায়ের নেজ। ওরে ভজ নারায়ণ জপ নারায়ণ লহ নারায়ণ নাম রে, ওরে যে জন নারায়ণ ভজে সে তো আমার প্রাণ রে, ভজ নারায়ণ জপ নারায়ণ।
Moreover, paintings depicting the Hindu lion-headed god Narayana are sometimes locally viewed as being synonymous with Satyapir, especially among the Muslim Jadu Patwas themselves. Without any obvious reference to Santhal culture, Archer also refers to scrolls celebrating the stories of Krishna as among important types of Jadu Patwa paintings. Specifically, the stories revolving around Krishna's exploits and merriment with the milkmaids are especially popular. Archer argues that the reason for these scrolls being so popular among the Santhals is that the dance and playfulness of the narratives reflect the Santhals' own ethos, which can be witnessed in their own dance traditions and festivals. Jadu Patwas also paint scrolls depicting the mythological heroes of the 12 Santhal clans, furthering these paintings' role as an insight into the cultural heritage of the Santhals. The Santhals congregate around the temple area and partake in the general festivities, dancing and drumming. Though this is still a popular activity for the Santhals, the scroll genre is not as popular as it once used to be. There have been many recent developments in urban galleries and museums to accommodate folk and tribal art. This, in many ways, has had an impact on the traditional forms and themes. Dr. Jyotindra Jain, art historian and director of the Department of Arts and Aesthetics, Jawaharlal Nehru University, argues that this is a positive step as it potentially creates an environment conducive to innovation as well as breaking down the rigid barriers that still tend to separate low from high art forms.
A modern Indian artist has always been painting or creating works of art, also deriving inspiration from the so-called folk and tribal tradition. We have several examples. We have examples of Haripura murals. We have examples of Jamini Roy. Particularly, Jamini Roy was quite a kind of leader of a movement in which he would derive inspiration from the works of Patuas and also from painted clay figures, etc., toys and things he saw and he derived.
The great masters of modern Indian art like Jamini Roy and New Bengal School of Painters, especially Nandalal Bose in the Haripura Congress series, used elements of the Patua imagery and other indigenous art traditions to define a modern aesthetic that was truly Indian.
for example, this Francesco Clementi, who does a lot of collaborations with Indian folk and tribal artists. And I think one of his critics once said a marvelous thing. He said that Clementi works through another's consciousness. Now, suppose I work through my own consciousness, I know what I can produce. So it's very predictable. But if I work with you, I don't know how your consciousness will work in collaboration with mine, and therefore something more wonderful can happen. So as a tool, I think many things can happen working in collaboration. Now is the question of modern artists resisting the coming of the tribal artists in modern art spaces, as they say that this is our space, this is modern art space, it is not fair for tribal artists to come in because they are working in another genre from another tradition. I think their worry is not right, and for my feeling, as I call it, they are suffering from what I call Kabuliwala syndrome. You remember the story of Rabindranath Tagore, that he wrote about a Kabuliwala who came to India, and he stayed here for 10-15 years to earn money selling pista and dry fruits. And when he was leaving for India from Afghanistan, his daughter gave a small impression of her foot and said that when you come back, bring me shoes for me. And he was carrying the foot impression. When 10-12 years later, when he was returning, he suddenly remembered. So he brought out a piece of paper and went to a cobbler and said, please make shoes for my daughter. She had told me to bring shoes. So when he took out, and then they talked, and Kabuliwala said, I brought this 12 years ago. So he said, by now your daughter must have grown up and got married also. So what will you do with these small shoes? I think like that, contemporary artists are still thinking that folk and tribal artists are still in that age, and that in these 50-70 years they haven't changed, or as if modernity, life around them has not as if influenced them. So I think they are suffering from Kabuliwala syndrome.
The Jadupat or magic paintings depicting the songs and sorrows of the lives of the Santhals have passed from the idyllic world of the Santhals and Patuas of yesteryears to the present fast-changing world. Overtaken by the march of time, bypassed by ready-made entertainment galore, and forsaken by the diminishing interest of their Santhal patrons, Patuas today are seeking greener pastures, abandoning their time-honored profession. Only a few survive today, trying desperately to make a living out of it, thus keeping it from vanishing altogether.